Things to be mindful of when you are writing your answers in the written response part. A lot of people err on the side of, if I write everything I know down, some of it will be right. Okay? That's going to, A, take you too long, and then you'll run into problems finishing the test. And secondly, I'll read the whole thing. And if you start kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? It just totally slipped my mind. Well, no, it's not so much blandering on, but if you start contradicting, that was the word I was looking for. If you start contradicting yourself, okay, that is saying one thing and then saying another thing a few sentences later that's the exact opposite, that clearly shows me you have no clue what you're talking about. Okay? And as a result, I can't give you marks for stuff you said that was right because you said the exact same thing or the exact opposite thing was also right. And that's not true. Okay, you guys follow me there? So when you're writing an answer, you kind of got to pick it and go, all right, I got to talk about this. Okay, I think this is what it's about. I'm going to talk about this. I'm not going to say other stuff because I think I should just write more. Okay. Now, that said, you also need to look at how much the question is out of. Okay? If it's a 5-mark question, there's probably 5 points that I'm looking for in that answer. If you write down, you see a picture of a plant growing vines up a stick, and I ask you, what's this picture showing? It's out of 5 marks, and you write thigmotropism. Good job. 1 out of 5, because that was only one of the 5 things I was looking for. Okay, if you had enough knowledge to know, hey, that's thigmotropism, you could have probably told me a little more about it, right? Like, how does it happen? Why does it happen? Oh, it's growth stimulated by touch. And the way that all tropisms work is auxins go to one side of the stem and make it grow faster than the other, and that causes it to curl, and then it could grab on. Then suddenly you're at 4 or 5 out of 5, okay? Because you've said the details that go along with that. Okay, is that making sense for how we want to plan our answers? Okay, don't go overboard, don't write too much, but at the same time, look at what it's out of and make sure you have enough stuff to count for that many points. Okay? All right. So, first thing we went over, okay, cell theory. Cell theory had how many points? 3 points, okay? All organisms are made up of cells. Cells carry out the basic functions, and holy smoke, that's going to be the most important of the 3, okay? And cells reproduce by binary fission. They split in half. Cells come from the division of existing cells. Okay? But this one here, we came back to time and time again in this unit. Right? We talked about it when we were talking about how cells transport materials. Diffusion, osmosis, active transport. Okay? They needed those things. Okay? In order to carry out some of their basic functions, they had to be able to move things within the cell. So anytime you see a question that's asking about how a cell works, you probably want to work in something about basic functions on a question like that. Don't just go, the cell does this and this and this and this. Basic functions. Okay? I mean, just then I know you're just going, hey, Coder said basic functions is important. Explain how it fits in there, right? Everyone follow on that? I mean, it's a good trick, but I didn't just fall off the turnip truck. He was carrying potatoes. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay. Now, so that's going to be part of your explanation for written response items. Okay. Could there be a multiple choice question about the cell theory? Certainly. Okay. Which of the following is not a part of the cell theory or something like that? Okay. There certainly could be some of that. Okay. So, mostly multiple choice, but like we said, this part here could be part of your explanation for some of your written response items, especially if we're talking about things like cell size and transport. Okay, that surface area to volume stuff that we talked about, there's some questions on that. Okay, second thing we talked about, microscopes. You need to be able to estimate the size of an object. You need to remember your lab drawing format. Okay, things like where does the title go, where does the size go, how should your labels look, okay, things like that. Just in case you're asked to draw one. Obviously, you would not be marked on your artistic ability. That would be so incredibly hypocritical of me, okay, because you've seen how I draw. Right? Basically just format, but I would say this is probably the biggest one. Being able to estimate the size of the object, and we talked about that. You take the field of view, like on the high power, that's 400 micrometers, and you estimate how many would fit across. If it's 4, each one is 100 micrometers. Okay, something like that. Okay, and how a microscope works. Okay, that was one of your analysis questions in the microscopy lab, that whole refraction of light as it hits lenses. Okay, being able to maybe explain that, or maybe there's going to be a multiple choice question about how a microscope works. Okay, there is not going to be a diagram of a microscope for you to label. Okay, that's not going to be on there. No, if I was going to ask you to draw a picture, like a lab drawing, I would give you a picture. I would say, here's the organism you looked at, and here's like, I'd probably put a circle around it and say, that's your field of view. The circle is what you saw through the microscope. Draw a lab drawing of that thing. Yeah, okay. Yeah, because it would be tough for me to say, draw a lab drawing of a euglena. And, well, if I remember what a euglena looked like from the lab, sure, I might be able to do that, right? But I would give you a picture of something to draw. All right, third thing we talked about, okay, modes of nutrition. First off, you got to know the two terms for sure, photoautotroph, chemoheterotroph, okay, that's not even spelt right, photoautotroph, okay, chemoheterotroph, definitely know those. Know what types of organelles they need to have in order to survive, to carry out their basic functions that might come into play on that one. Okay. If you were explaining about modes of nutrition, right? One of the basic functions of a photoautotroph is to be able to carry out photosynthesis. Right? So compare and contrast. That's what we did in class. We looked at the cell structure and we found that there was a lot of things in common. Okay? More than there were different. But the differences were all related to how does this cell get energy? Does it get it using light, or does it get it by eating other things? All right, so that could be in both parts of the test. It could be in the multiple choice, but it could also be in the written response. Okay, functions of the organelles and cellular transport. If there's one thing on this test that's probably got more stuff on it than anything else, it would be this. Okay, where can you find all of this? Lesson 5. Okay, we went over what every part of the cell does. Okay. Are you also going to have to label a cell? Definitely. Okay. You are definitely going to have to label a cell, so go back to your cell diagrams and get them figured out. Obviously, they're not going to be the same diagrams. Okay. Every time you had a quiz, it was a new picture of a cell, but I mean, a cell is a cell. Yes. Just like what you were asked to do on a quiz, except probably not the whole cell, right? As opposed to having 24 questions, it would be, name these 5 structures. Yeah. Okay, but since you don't know which 5 I'm going to ask, you do have to know them all, right? Okay, and then cellular transport. Okay, there's going to be lots of stuff in the written response about cellular transport. How many cell transport methods were we mainly concerned with? 3. There's 2 that are more important than the third, but diffusion, osmosis, active transport, right? Third one's active transport. Okay, so yes, you should be able to explain those to me, or more importantly, because this is how I'm going to ask, I'll give you a situation. Okay, here's a cell or here's an organism, it's in this situation. Which cell transport process is going to be most involved here, and explain how. So in a question like that, you would have to say it's osmosis or it's active transport. Then give me a description of that cell transport process, and then explain how it relates to that situation. Okay, everybody follow me on that? So you're going to need to know each of them well enough to be able to do that. Okay, so like I said, of all the marks on the test, the most are from that lesson, lesson 5. Okay, so little things here about the 3 transport methods. Okay, things that you should remember or kind of make notes on. Okay, and that is, remember that osmosis only transports one thing, water. So if the question is specifically asking about water, it is probably not asking about diffusion or active transport. Okay, and remember that osmosis doesn't work in the cytoplasm, it is an across the membrane thing. Okay, that's why it can cause a cell to shrivel up or pop, okay, because it's moving stuff in and out of the cell as opposed to around the cell. Okay, it's balancing salts. Okay, be able to apply that. Okay, identify the applicable situation. Diffusion. Okay, things just anything. Diffusion can transport anything, but it always does it from high to low. Okay, it's not targeted. And it's affected by cell size. It only works good over small distances. So if you've got a question and it's talking about a big cell and a small cell, you probably better find a way to work diffusion into that answer. Okay, we did that activity with the cubes. That was the whole purpose of that activity. Okay, was to illustrate what happens as a cell gets bigger. Okay, does a cell's shape affect its ability to transport things by diffusion? That surface area and volume. Okay, all of that is really important there. And then the third one, active transport. Okay, remember it's different because it uses energy. Okay, and it's transporting from low to high. Okay, that's why it has to use energy. It's pumping things uphill. Okay, so like we said, that's going to be mostly written response. But that doesn't mean there couldn't be some multiple choice questions in there about that stuff as well. Just more of it is going to be written response. Okay, cell size, surface area to volume ratios. Okay, again, that goes back, like we said, to diffusion. Okay, basic functions, right? Being able to transport things is a basic function. As a cell gets bigger, right, it's difficult for it to get materials where they're needed, okay, or excrete wastes, get food, okay? All that kind of stuff is affected as a cell gets bigger, right? So that's another thing you could work basic functions into. Okay, multicellularity, right? We talked about that. Okay, we talked about how you have to have specialization to be a true multicellular organism. That is, you have cells within an organism that are different, okay, that are doing different jobs. And then, of course, we got that could relate back to this cell size thing. The advantage of being multicellular was things could get big without having to deal with having a big volume over a surface area. Okay? Remember, we want surface area to be big and volume to be small. But if you're a single cell and you're getting big, it becomes volume over surface area very fast. Okay? Multicellular organisms maintain a high surface area to low volume ratio even though they're getting bigger. Okay? And that was a huge advantage of being multicellular. That's probably something you should be able to explain. Okay, so that covers what were the advantages. Okay. And that was actually a quiz question the other day. Okay, what was the whole reason for becoming multicellular? All right, 7th thing. Then we got into plants. Okay, need to know the parts of a plant: roots, stem, leaves. What are their jobs? Okay, are they examples of specialized cells? That goes back to multicellularity, and that's why there's an arrow, okay, going from this thing down here, okay, back up to specialization. Okay, leaf structure is our primary example of an organism with cells specialized to do certain jobs. So expect to see that leaf diagram on the test somewhere related to multicellularity. Okay? Palisade layer cells are specialized to carry out photosynthesis. Cells in the epidermis are secreting the cuticle. Spongy layer cells have gaps between them to hold gases and water vapor. You need to know the parts. I'm not necessarily going to ask you to label it, but you need to know the parts so that you can explain to me how they're specialized. Right. Okay, like in guard cells, they can do this. They have a special job. They're different from the cells in the palisade layer. Okay, it's an example of a multicellular organism with specialized cells. Okay, and then we talked about plant transport. Okay, obviously osmosis is a huge part of that. It is the biggest part of it because it's the thing that makes the force that pulls up the plant. Okay, I'm not saying that the polar nature of water is unimportant. It is also important, but it doesn't create a pulling force up. It just keeps the stuff from falling back down. Okay, it is osmosis, that osmotic pressure that pulls water up the stem. So you got to be able to explain that. Okay, why does osmosis able to do that? Okay, why is it get set up? Okay, so explain what happens in the leaf when water evaporates. When we did our plant transport lab, okay, one of the big issues, sorry, I haven't talked about that yet. I'm supposed to talk about that today because you guys handed that in yesterday. Talk about it right now. One of the biggest problems in that lab was question number 3 in the analysis. What would be the effect of adding salt to the water that your plant was in? Okay, the effect of that would be that the plant would be unable to transport water. Because if I have a whole bunch of salt at the bottom and not enough at the top, water doesn't know which way is up. Water goes towards salt. So it would actually draw water out of the plant. It would cause osmosis to essentially work the wrong way. A few people said it would use reverse osmosis, which isn't right because reverse osmosis is an artificial process where you push water through a membrane. That's a different thing. Okay? But osmosis would go the wrong way in terms of what the plant would like. It's going the right way in terms of what osmosis is supposed to do. Balance salt. The only way it can balance salt is to pull it out of the plant and move it to the salt water it's sitting in. Okay, everyone follow me there? So understanding how osmosis works in terms of setting up that pressure is an important thing you need to be able to explain on Monday. All right, knowing the tubes, xylem and phloem. Yep, definitely know those. Okay, there's almost always a question in the written response that says, name the tubes that do this, name the tubes that do this, explain how they do it. All right, strictly recall, but okay, you do need to know that. What does the phloem transport? Sugar. What force does it use? Gravity. Okay, this one uses osmosis and the polar nature of water. Okay, water evaporates out of the stomates, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you understand that. Okay, and then plant growth and developments. Okay, so this is tropisms, hormones, stuff like that. Okay, this will be in both parts. Okay, sorry, number 8 is almost all written response. Okay, number 9, there's some multiple choice on that. Okay, and they are going to have diagrams or pictures. Okay, there will be some written response on this as well, but more multiple choice. The exam is photocopied in color. Okay, there's that many pictures on it. Right, I photocopied it in color so the pictures would be clear to you. So if I'm showing you a picture of something and saying what's going on here, that's going to probably be a plant growth and development question. It might be about, you know, which hormone is this plant probably secreting right now if this is the situation it's in? Here's a picture of it. Or, you know, what hormone is causing this thing to happen in this plant or something like that, right? So you're going to look at the picture and go, well, it looks like that's, you know, a banana that's ripening. Oh, well, I know what hormone causes that, and so on. Okay, does that sort of make sense? Okay, so we need to know the hormones. Okay, be able to know what they do, so that if I show you a picture, you go, oh, well, that's auxins, or that's you know, gibberellins, or that's ethylene, or whatever. And then tropisms. Remember, you need to explain how a tropism works. Okay, a tropism happens because the plant grows at different rates on each side. That is caused by making auxins go to one side of the plant more than the other, okay, so that those cells grow faster. Okay. that would be, obviously, if you're explaining that, that's a written response item. Okay. We also talked about the factors that affect plant growth, right? And there could be in some of the pictures an obvious factor that's affecting plant growth, and you can say, well, if that factor is doing that, the plant's going to have to react in this way. So it would be related back to growth and development. How does this factor affect the growth and development of a plant? Or how does this factor affect the plant's ability to transport? You'd know based on the question which way it was asking. Okay, and then lastly, still need to know your scientific method. We did that lab design activity to review that. Okay, if I give you an experiment, you need to be able to tell me, oh, this is the responding variable, or these are controlled variables. If I give, here's an experiment that was being run, what's the manipulated variable here? Okay, you still need to be able to do that. That's basically in every single unit. All right, so on your test. Okay, there are 26 multiple choice questions, so less than your chem test. The written response is out of 53 marks. Okay, and there are 9 written response items. Okay, now all but 3 of those, so 2/3 of the written response items involve pictures or diagrams. Okay, so it's very much a visual kind of test. Okay, we did talk about plant transport in there. Maybe something I didn't mention would be, you should probably be able to talk about the adaptations a plant has that allow it to control/regulate how much water it loses by evaporation. Okay, there's 2 ways that a plant does that. You should probably know both. Okay, because it has to do with plant transport, but it also has to do with specialization. Okay, so write that down. Think about how you might go over that. Okay, and then there's plant growth and development, cell, like labeling it, multicellularity and specialization, plant transport, cell transport, plant growth and development, cell functioning, and size. Okay, that's what your 9 written response items are on. Okay, which part of this test should you do first? Absolutely. Okay, you've got a lot of writing to do. Okay, on this test. Okay, more than you had on the chem test. Okay, so you need to make sure you get the writing done first. Then go back to the multiple choice. Because honestly, I think the multiple choice will go quite quickly. It's mostly recall stuff. Okay, so it's I either know this or I don't. Okay, and I think you'll get through it really, really quickly. So make sure that you leave it for the end. All right. Have you guys got questions before I hand out your review package? Okay.